There's a whole world of cinema to be discovered. You just have to overcome that 1-inch barrier known as subtitles. Welcome to that 1-inch barrier. Nicola Barrow, Josh Barry, and Kieran Griffiths, as always. Gentlemen, how are we this morning?
Good. I feel like I haven't seen you guys in 36 hours.
In days.
Yeah.
In almost 2 whole days. But no, we've spent a lot of time watching films together and talking about films recently where it's coming to the end of the year. It's coming to Christmas, so we're getting a bit of a back catalogue of things going. But we all saw Seven in 35mm the other night, in which the best way to describe it is how do you make the darkest, grittiest movie darker and grittier? You watch it on a grungy 35mm print, and that enhances that experience. And it was a sold-out crowd, which is awesome. So it was good to experience it ultimately like you would have in 1995. But that's for another podcast because there are no subtitles in Seven. However, there are subtitles in today's pick. But obviously, before we get into it, thank you all for watching. If you are watching on YouTube or if you're listening to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts, we really appreciate the support. The show is going from strength to strength every week. And we've got a fun collection of films coming up. Obviously, you are listening to this episode after our first sort of spin-off-y episode, I guess you could say.
Bonus episode.
Little
treat for you guys.
Yeah, because we love yous and we want to thank yous. And we also want to keep watching good movies. Yeah. So you would have listened to All Quiet on the Western Front recently, which obviously was the best international feature winner at the Oscars for 2022, which was, obviously, thank you for the support on that episode too. But that will come continuously throughout the series. But we are back to the beginning now. It is Josh's pick for this month. So what are we talking about on this episode today, mate?
Yeah, well, I guess it's fitting going after the Oscar episode because we've got a Oscar nominee.
That's true.
From 2000. Director Alejandro Iñárritu. And I have yet again picked another debut feature film. I realised.
Love every first features,
I've actually, every single pick I've done. So going back to the year 2000, his first film, kind of a big moment in Mexican cinema.
Yeah.
Before this, there wasn't too much going on.
I think because we kind of talked about that with It's Mama También too,
right?
Yeah.
Because and that was obviously just a year after this one. And this one is a 2-hour 34. So it's not a short film.
We picked some goodies this series for time-wise.
It follows, it's 3 stories.
Yes.
And each story connects in a pretty horrific car crash.
Yeah.
And it's told in 3 really separate installments.
It's very interesting, the story structure, I guess, is quite Pulp Fiction-y, I guess you could sort of relate it to.
Yeah, that's probably the most sort of prevalent example that people would probably be familiar with. Yeah. It's a term which is used as hyperlink cinema.
Okay.
Which was coined by, I think, a film critic in the 90s.
Yeah, right.
So it basically describes any story where you've got these sort of interconnecting character arcs so that the characters might not themselves have anything to do with one another, but one event or one person sort of links them all together.
Interesting.
But yeah, Pulp Fiction is a great example because obviously we see the story between John Travolta's character and Uma Thurman's character. We see Bruce Willis's character. And then what's the third story?
It's a great question.
Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel L. Jackson and
Tarantino. Yeah, so that's probably the most common example of a film like this. And we should mention it's Amores Perros because I don't think anyone's actually said the title yet.
It's Amores Perros, which translates roughly
to Love's a Bitch.
Love's a Bitch.
So there's...
Which is a fitting title.
It's a very fitting title.
There's dog themes throughout the 3 stories as well.
Yes. Yeah, very prevalent. Which is... I mean, maybe I should have expected it with Love's a Bitch, but I think that's probably one of the central core themes to the film, right? Is that despite these... In the human stories, there's, stories of betrayal, there's stories of loyalty, love lost. Yep. The one common denominator is why is dog really man's best friend, or how we as humans kind of turn to dogs as support, I guess, in many different ways, not just emotionally, but also monetarily.
Dogs play different roles across all the different characters. They're a source of escape, they're a source of income, they're a companion, they are unconditional love.
Yeah.
So I think...
It's very interesting, isn't it? Hey,
We'll get into it more, but I think it's one of these films that on the surface it is just this crime drama with a really unique perspective on its story.
Yeah.
But it does have a lot of deeper themes around, human relationships and how that compares to our relationship with animals.
Yep.
And like I said, those themes of love and loyalty and escape and things like that. So there's a lot of layers to the film straight off the bat.
Yeah. And we're probably a bit of a disclaimer for everybody. This is hard to watch at points. There's some
very early on, I guess.
Yeah, very early
it
on.
doesn't really hide
Especially
its
the
cards.
first story. No.
Yeah, if you are uncomfortable with depictions of animal cruelty,
Yes.
this is not the film for you. I will just say that straight off the bat.
I know it doesn't hold back.
No,
Very
I'm
much
happy
so.
for someone to not watch this because they're uncomfortable with the concept because it is rough.
Yeah.
graphic
it
too.
is.
Very, very tough watch. I tried getting my partner to watch it not knowing just how bad it was. I'm very glad that I didn't manage to convince her to watch it because she would have probably walked out within the first
Gone,
15
yeah.
minutes.
No,
So
understandable.
It premiered at Cannes.
Yes.
And I watched a little interview with Iñárritu, and he went to the screening, and pretty early on, a lot of people started leaving the cinema. And as he's watching them go, he was like, "Oh, I just can't deal with this." He left.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
He just went down by the beach. He
chill
said
out.
he smoked 2 packets of cigarettes. And it was just like, what have I done?
yeah,
What's
I
going-
mean, fair. Like, it's interesting because when we were talking about the film the other night briefly, you were talking about how Mark Kermode, who's obviously a very trusted and respected film critic, was talking about the fact that this movie. Oh, sorry, was it Mark Kermode saying it, or was it he saying it to Iñárritu was saying it to someone about how this movie's so different to everything he's made since then in his styling and his stuff. So I can imagine as well as a first-time filmmaker, this frantic movie that opens with very frantic editing and this high energy, this almost like cocaine level of excitement, I guess so to say. You wonder if people are walking out for that reason too and being like, oh, this is just another young filmmaker making this high energy bullshit. Whereas, you know, it's more than likely the dog fighting.
For
That's
sure.
occurring. So it'd be real scary for a first time director at a
Yeah.
thing like Cannes as well.
But I guess just on the dogfighting, like a lot of people thought it was real.
I can see why.
Yeah, that's right. So it only is it the BBFC?
Oh yeah.
They ended up passing it uncut when they saw all the behind the scenes.
Right.
Of, of how they
say no,
actually
like
filmed
Cannibal
it.
Holocaust sort of.
Yeah, no one's
shit
cooking
here.
a turtle.
That's
like
right.
But it's
so they did it uncut,
graphic and confronting and.
And there's a disclaimer at the start of the film. Did you?
So I didn't get one.
Well, I didn't either, but I just obviously back then they put a disclaimer at the start, which wasn't usual back then. They used to put them at the end.
Unless there is one, but because all my opening credits were in Spanish without the subtitles.
Oh, true.
So it might have said something initially that like
true,
no
true.
dogs. Because I did remember reading that. It actually started with no dogs were harmed in the
harmed,
making of
Which
this film.
I've never seen a film that makes a disclaimer like that at the start that I've had so much trouble believing.
Even barking dogs never bite, which maybe we should step away from films about animal cruelty. But that's on me and you. Kieran, you're safe so far.
I need to pick up the slack.
That's right.
Cannibal Holocaust is the next pick.
Choose a different animal next time. But it's funny, like even that we were like, oh, that one scene of the dog getting strung up by its collar was bad, but this is dog fights, and we see lots of dead dogs, which aren't dead, obviously, because as we
They look pretty bloody dead.
So I mean, I'll let you take this.
Well, no, I was just reading that they were all heavily sedated, those scenes.
Wow.
So they also
I thought it was prosthetics when I watched. I was like, holy shit, these look amazing. But I was like,
they had
what's
they
the
had
cheap way?
doubles.
Just needle in the dog.
Yeah, they did have doubles for all the dogs, so that none of them were sedated for longer than half an hour. It said.
Yeah.
which I think's fair.
But that is
As
how they
humane
got
as
that
possible, I
looking
guess.
so real.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Jeez. Yeah, it is a tough watch, and it obviously attracted a lot of controversy at the time for its depiction of dogfighting, not because it's graphic, but also because it is illegal
Yes.
in Mexico, as it should be and is in most of the world.
But in saying that, the film also really points out, like, this is not. It's illegal and it's not a good thing. The movie
No, it's
is-
very much an underground thing, and that's
Totally,
what Iñárritu said. Is he said, well, if you say that it's not happening in Mexico, you're burying your head in the sand
right.
because this is the reality for a lot of poor people who are looking to make a quick buck, and that is a big part of I guess the first of the film's three stories is our character trying to escape his life of poverty through dogfighting.
Yeah.
Which, is, by the sounds of it, a pretty fair reflection of what life was like at that time.
So it's funny, it's a perfect segue into my thoughts about this. Because the first story, Octavio and Susanna, and Octavio is
Gael Garcia Bernal.
Gael Garcia Bernal, who
Making his second appearance on the show.
Yes,
Very much so.
Friend of the show, Gael.
But this is his first film.
So that's crazy. Hey,
It was weird to me. He looked older in this than he did in
Yeah,
Tu
you're
Mama.
right. Yeah, you're right.
But the first thing that really stuck out to me about this first story, because like the opening scene is this frantic car chase, and you have no idea what's going on. There's a dog dying in the back seat of the car. It's a great car chase.
Scene.
They're getting guns pulled on them by a Mexican, and then there's just a horrific car accident. Cuts black, and then we backtrack a little bit. And the first thing I got is that the visual style and the way Iñárritu moves the camera around reminded me a lot of Et Mama Tabiem, where it's kind of like Cuarón just capturing the lifestyle. And I thought it was like a very blue collar Mexican lifestyle as well. These, obviously to get to the point of having to use your dog to get into dogfighting to make money, you mustn't really come from a lot. And I think both movies do that very well and capture Mexico in a very similar time as well, where there's probably a bit more talk in this film about the civil unrest and the lack of trust in politicians, which is briefly mentioned in It's a Mama Tabiem, but it's very much a central plot line of why a lot of these young teenagers to early adult Mexicans were resorting to crime, and not just as a form of income, but as a source of like rebellion against a shit government. And I think that's captured that very fly on the wall sort of camera. And when we get to the other two stories, I do think Iñárritu changes his directing style to capture those when we get, because obviously similar to Et Mama, classism is another big theme in this film as well. And we obviously start the film with the blue collar, blue collar Mexican culture. So I think, those similarities in that, the fact they come from the same country in the same time. Yeah. From directors who may have known each other as well. Like they might,
they did.
Their rap
I think we mentioned it in It's a Mama Tabiem that's how Cuarón got Gael, because he'd seen an early cut of this film.
That's
Well, it's sort of like the little Mexican trio almost of Cuarón, Iñárritu, and Guillermo del Toro.
Yes.
It's incredible that we've got these three amazing directors all sort of working at the same time.
I'm going to throw
from Mexico.
in a completely different... But I'm going to throw Robert Rodriguez in there as well. I'm a fan of his work.
The unofficial fourth member.
Spy Kids 2 is all time, okay?
But
you're right. It's
2006, there was an amazing year. Babel for him, Pan's Labyrinth for Del Toro.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And Children of Men for Cuarón.
Wow.
So they were hitting it out of the park.
Yeah.
That is a good year for movies.
Like before that, really, Iñárritu says that Mexico, if you're a director, you're probably only making one film in your life.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Like you would be very rare to make a second film, and that's another reason he kind of said he just threw everything on this movie, like just threw it all at the screen.
If I'm going to make one movie, I'm going to make a 2.5 hour, intersecting stories.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. And I mean, they're all now Academy Award winners.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right.
Which is astonishing.
Right.
But I think you're right. I think it makes a great companion piece
Totally.
to It's a Mama.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think
I agree.
if you're going to watch one and you like one of them, definitely watch the other. They're very different stories, obviously.
And tonally quite different.
Yeah, but I think they work really well off of one another and are a great sort of, portrayal of a time and a place.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I think as well, another thing I just wanted to point out with the blue collar style of it as well is that the brother of Octavio, who is married to Susanna, and the story basically is that Octavio is in love with Susanna and wants to run away with her, and his brother's quite abusive and whatnot, is that when you get a figure like that in those films, he usually, and not just in Mexican films, but like even in films that are set like predominantly in like maybe even Los Angeles and stuff like that, there's usually some like sort of gang affiliation or like there's some sort of figure who is very villainous. This guy just works in a supermarket. You know what I mean? Like day to day, he's just, and you're watching him just pleasant and nice to customers and just doing the job.
Bagging groceries.
Bagging groceries. And then he comes home.
I thought you were about to say banging grocery assistants.
different job.
Gang banging groceries.
Different for gang banging groceries. There's a different, he's a different person when he comes home because, similar to what we were saying before, he's angry at his life. He doesn't like, he's insecure about things, but he's also a testosterone-driven male and a very testosterone-driven.
Yeah, it's also in there that, the pregnancy and the kid.
Obviously,
a bit of a mistake, and
yeah,
he wasn't
totally.
happy
He doesn't
about
want
it
to
at the
be
start,
a father, basically. So he's very neglectful to the child and whatnot. So it just captures this, which I think the importance of pointing this out is that when we see the stark differences in the next two stories, it very much feels like a deliberate commentary on that sort of life and sort of how blue collar people were treated in Mexico in the late 90s, I guess you could say.
We've got three very different stories about three very different groups of people.
Totally.
So, as Nick said, the first story follows Octavio and Susana. And he's, as Nick said, trying to run off with his sister-in-law because his brother Ramiro treats her like shit.
Yep.
The second story follows Daniel and Valeria.
Yes.
Daniel's a magazine publisher. Valeria is a supermodel. And Daniel leaves his wife to be with Valeria. And the sort of the fallout of that and how their story interconnects with Octavio's. And then the third story is El Chivo and Maru. And El Chivo is a homeless hitman who we sort of come to learn more about.
Which was a great reveal.
Past.
Did not see, because I obviously earlier in the film you do see El Chivo do something where you're like, oh fuck, why did he do that? Like, what's the point? And then when he reads it in the paper, and I was kind of thinking it was going that way, but then the actual, which is a great reveal in the film, the conversation where he's not even involved and you find out all about his past. I did like the way that was sort of slowly drip fed to us.
Even though it's, a character explicitly stating the information, it does feel very much like a show don't tell. Like it's because we're not getting it from the character themselves. So I really love that.
He's not sitting there going like, and then 20 years ago I was in the Marines and did this. Yeah, exactly. It feels like a unique way at least to deliver exposition. But yeah, it's still a very different story too.
Yeah. So we've got this, young family living in the slums. We've got this, married man having an affair with a supermodel.
Yeah.
And then we've got a homeless hitman. So it's like, how do these stories all come together? So it was really interesting seeing,
it's a
maybe
interesting connection.
Halfway, 2/3 of the way through the film, we sort of fully realize how everything interconnects.
Totally.
And so that was really interesting to see unfold. And we do get snippets of each story within each story, if that makes sense. So during the first story, we do see some stuff about Daniel and Valeria, and we do see some stuff about El Chivo. And then once we leave Octavio's story, we do still get sort of updates from him.
Yes.
But I think it's a really interesting and engaging way to do the story.
It's,
The problem that I had with it, the first story was the best.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I do want to talk about this.
Yeah.
I think the structure of how the stories are told affects the, I guess for lack of a better word, enjoyment of the film. And it's very brave of us to say, Kieran, because this is a very highly regarded film. This is, a lot of people do say this may be Iñárritu's best movie.
It's a Criterion release, which is always a pretty good indicator of quality.
Totally. And that's not to knock the quality of the other two films. Oh, the other two stories, sorry. But I did find my interest wavering significantly after the end of the first story. And I think it's because maybe the emotional investment in the first one is a lot higher. And I don't really care about Daniel and Valeria that much. Maybe.
The middle story for me, actually, this is probably maybe the third or fourth time I've seen it.
Right, yeah.
Annoys.
It is annoying, isn't it?
It's the constant Richie.
I guess for context as well.
An hour.
For context of that, and I guess how dogs relate to the story is that their little dog Richie gets stuck under the floorboards
of the
and they
apartment.
don't know where he is, and then they'll have an argument or like a day will go by and then they'll hear Richie somewhere else and they'll try
in the middle of the night they'll hear it and then they'll start ripping some floorboards
so
up,
they're trying
but
to find the she's
constantly calling out his name.
And I think part of it as well is sort of like almost how El Chivo's story is about how dogs can be your companions. I think there's a little bit of that with Valeria as well, because how she's impacted by the connecting tissue of the story forces her to be a recluse in her home to an extent, right?
Yeah.
So she needs that companionship, especially when Daniel's not there all the time. And I think that's potentially to me what that story was saying as well.
Yeah, and I know
it is the shortest out of the three, I will say as well. That is the shortest.
It feels like the longest.
It
does feel like the longest.
I would be quite happy to cut that story out of the film and just have the other two.
The other two, yeah.
To be honest, because I was so engaged with the first story. I loved the characters. I loved the story. And I think the first story had someone for me to root for.
Yep.
Even though Octavio
Yes,
isn't perfect, he's very grabby with Susanna.
Oh yeah.
You're not doing yourselves any favors there, Octavio.
That Ed Mama casting came a little too fucking too
Close
easy.
to home. But and you know, he does make his dog go and fight in the dog fights so that he can make enough money so that he and Susanna can run
In
away.
his defense, he doesn't do it until he realizes dogs are real good killing machines. So, I mean, I'm not trying to justify dog fighting, but he at least, like, his dog kills a couple of other dogs and he's like, oh shit, we can make money out of it.
Yeah.
You never told me you were good at fighting.
Yeah. Woof. Yeah, that's very good. Good point.
But I was rooting for him.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I wanted him to succeed. I wanted him to go away with Susanna and for them to have this happy life together. And that's what I was holding out for.
Yeah.
And then I didn't like Daniel or Valeria.
No.
And I think that's the point as well. I
agree.
But
I agree.
I, at the same time, it does affect the enjoyment,
Enjoyment
of
of
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
for sure.
I'm glad to hear you're on a similar page.
Yeah,
of, like, it's just,
and
yeah,
each
it's
time I've always that middle story. I'm like, yeah, okay, get
Here it
through
comes.
this. Yeah, here comes the Richie.
I think as well because of where it ends, and I'm not spoiling anything, but its lack of then connection to the later, like how the film sort of wraps up too, kind of makes me go, "What's the point?" I get in a way.
I mean, yeah, she's obviously in the car accident.
Yes,
but
and that's the strongest part of the
That's right,
connection,
the
right?
connection,
Yeah, but it
yeah.
very much fizzles
Yeah.
away, and I guess I don't.
Whereas the other, the first and the last have a
strong-
quite a big connection,
very
obviously,
strong
with
connection
Coffee
towards
the
it.
dog, and
Yeah,
yeah. So no, I agree on the middle story. I think the end story is strong as well, though.
I like it.
Yeah.
But I think it's tough to come back from that middle
Yeah.
part. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was more invested in El Chivo's story than I was with.
I would watch a whole film of Daniel and Valeria's story. I would watch a whole film of El
Yeah,
Chivo's
yeah,
story.
Yeah.
I would not watch a full film of Daniel. Sorry, I would watch a full film of Octavio and
Octavio,
Susanna.
yeah.
Not Daniel and Valeria.
And I wouldn't watch Daniel and Valeria.
no.
Sorry, there's a lot of names here.
Lot of names,
We're
lot of names,
going to
lot
get
of
things wrong.
stories, lot of names, lot of stories. I guess that sort of can take us. We'll talk about El Chivo's story a little bit as well because it's sort of he's a homeless man. He's a vagrant, as they sort of the subtitles was telling me throughout the film, who has a whole lot of stray dogs with him. And the first time we do see him in the film is during Octavio's and Susanna's story when there's a head honcho gangster guy who has the best dog fighting dog and he needs the dog to let off some steam and he sees the stray dogs and he goes, just let him off on that pack of stray dogs. And this homeless man just appears with a machete and he's like, don't touch my fucking dogs. Like, I will slice your dog up. I have no qualms doing that. And dogs are companion for him because as we learn about his story, he's estranged from his family because he became I guess a guerrilla terrorist to an extent.
There's like
which
a
led him-
freedom fighter.
Freedom fighter is probably a better word to say.
The
Yeah,
nice way of putting it.
nicer way of putting it for sure. Which then sort of estranged him from his family, and then he went sort of down this road where he then became a hitman and was taking out high profile government figures or at least attempting assassinations on them and stuff, and that became very much his identity. But he's now at a point where there's a death that occurs that he sees in the paper and he goes to the funeral and now he kind of wants reconnection with at least his daughter. And so it's kind of like to me, the connection with the dogs in the story is that like that you can find companionship in dogs and their loyalty as well, but there's something about human connection that is so strong that we all strive for and need at the end of the day and whatnot. So
I think as well, obviously he gets Coffee the dog,
yes, totally.
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
Octavio's dog.
Octavio's
Dog, yeah.
and that dog proceeds to kill all his other dogs.
So brutal when he comes home
in.
and
But I think he's just about to kill Coffee, but he doesn't.
he can't do it. Yeah,
That's
Because
probably
I
one of the
think-
most important, impactful
Yeah,
scenes
I
in the
agree.
film.
Totally agree.
Because
yeah.
I think that really connects with that idea of nature and nurture.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like Coffee's not a bad dog. He's just been conditioned to fight other
Yeah.
dogs. That's what he
Yeah.
knows and that's
Yeah.
what he thinks he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that sort of El Chivo sees himself.
Sees himself in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Because he's like, I've been fighting for as long as I can remember. It's all
Yeah.
I know. I don't know how to love and be happy anymore, and I've left all that behind. And he's sort of he's going to kill Coffee for killing all of his other dogs, and he goes, well,
I'm just as bad as
how am I any better than this dog who doesn't know any better?
And that I think is the chain reaction to get him to
where he ends up going to
his daughter,
and it's again, like I said, it's actually quite a nice, touching, beautiful story, and it is just has an uphill battle. After the second story in the film, so it's an interesting. The structure of the film is very interesting. I was actually thinking about it last night, and I kind of would have gone because then again, in I guess a sequential context, the Octavio and Susanna's story is the beginning of the film. There is the car accident, and then most of the other two stories are what the aftermath of those are, right?
Yeah.
I still think the movie could work if you have Daniel Valeria's story, El Chivo's story, and then there's this looming thing of like, why are these connected? And then we go back and it starts with the Susanna's story, and then we kind of see, we can still have the opening scene of the car accident, but that also closes out the film. That's probably more from an entertainment point of view, because I do find the last shot of this film quite touching, and I think it's actually closure for the story, and would probably feel weird if that was the beginning of your third act. But I think just structurally, I'm like, I wouldn't have minded seeing Octavio and Susanna's story at the end and sort of be like a flashback to be like, oh, this is what connected everyone.
Yeah. Or even just make it more of a through thread throughout the film. So rather than sort of stopping, a third of the way through the film and then we only get little bits of it for the rest of the movie, have it be the overarching story, because it is the most interesting one, I think.
I agree.
And then have the others sort of come in and out of their story and how that interconnects.
I'm also not Alejandro Iñárritu, so I'm not going to give him advice on how to structure.
I'm not an Academy Award-winning director.
I'd probably disagree with that. I love the way it's structured.
Yeah, no, fair.
I love it. Like
we're gonna have our first fight on the show.
Maybe,
The structure is one of the things that really grabs me.
Yeah,
And I love.
totally,
I actually love how the accident kind of almost ends that story, and it kind of begins that story, and then it's the middle of that story. For me, it's just I don't know if it's the actors involved in that middle story. I think it's a bit of the story, like it is all set in that apartment.
Yeah,
it's it's pretty much in that apartment.
Yeah.
Just sort of crying for this dog.
Yeah.
For about an hour or so. I
will say there's probably another element of it as well where she's kind of, for lack of a better word, haunted by, because she's a supermodel and she's obviously left slightly disfigured after this car accident.
Yeah.
She has this billboard of her that she can see from her house, which is kind of just a constant reminder of like, oh my God, that's what I was.
Yeah, which is the reason he bought that apartment for her.
It's so funny.
Come and look at the view.
So vain.
Yeah.
So vain. So there's more to it than them finding a dog, but it's still something where I'm like vanity doesn't seem like a interesting topic to explore. Just personally.
Yeah.
And I think as well, as I said, for me, it boils down to I just don't care about the characters.
Yeah.
I care about Octavio. I care about Susanna. I care about El Chivo. I want to see his redemption arc.
Yeah.
I don't care about the magazine publisher having an affair. I don't care about the supermodel trying to find her yappy little dog.
So not in this film anyway, because you just saying then kind of threw me back to Triangle of Sadness, which is a movie that could pop up eventually. Who knows? But that's a similar thing where it's kind of like you do sort of feel for those characters because they are in that world. So you are completely immersed in the high end, eat the rich sort of world, right? Yeah. Whereas this, where it starts off and you have a lot more of a sympathetic lens to someone who is far worse off than I have ever been and ever will be, right? So you are automatically looking at it through a sympathetic lens to then go to someone and be like, oh, you're fine. Like, okay, I'm sorry, you were in a car accident, it's awful, but you're gonna be okay.
But maybe that's on us as an audience then. Maybe
totally
it's
could
why is the suffering of the disenfranchised and the disadvantaged more impactful than the suffering?
It made me feel like a piece of shit now.
Are we more desensitized?
Such a good point
to the suffering of people who are in more fortunate positions. Because at the end of the day, she's become disfigured and disabled as a result of this car accident. She's lost her career as a supermodel, which is all she knows, and it's all she's known for. at the start of her bit, she's on a talk show, and the talk show host introduces her as, the woman every guy wants to be with.
Yeah.
Which is so demeaning and disgusting. But,
Totally, but
that's
it, right?
how she's seen. So for her to lose that, it's losing your identity as well. So
Interesting.
Look, I still find the story boring as hell.
No, but there's at least like substance to it.
There's a reason behind it, I think, and I think it does serve as a good sort of counterpoint to the kind of film that we've seen before. Because how many films do we see about the suffering of poor people?
It's
a real tearjerker, and that's I just thought of it then. I think
I think
is it interesting that we connect more with
the show. To make us sound really smart.
Someone's got to.
Someone's got to do it. Someone's got to do it. I guess we've kind of briefly touched on it already, but like its similarity to other films that have come out of Mexico, and obviously we talked about the stark similarity to something like It's Mama Bien. But do you have any other sort of like, not just story structure, but like the thematic and stuff? Does that kind of remind you of any other films that have come from?
I mean, I don't know if it's because about the same time I saw City of God. But definitely.
Very good
and
call,
that opening scene as well
man.
reminded me of a bit of the opening to City of God.
I love that movie.
Oh,
God, I love City of God.
That is actually
that's going to get done on the show at some point. That is a fantastic film.
But it's very similar.
It's gritty. It's kind of got a similar
very chaotic opening scene as well.
It's got a similar, like, kind of washed out. Cinematography.
Totally. Very similar time as well. City of God was
2002.
Wow. Okay. So there we go. So
the early 2000s were a great time for Central and South American crime dramas.
Absolutely. I kind of think as well, and I'm yet to see, I guess, Guillermo del Toro do his, but there are, even though it's set, 30, maybe 40 years earlier, there is a sentiment of Roma to it as well, and I think that's more just again looking at that blue collar experience in the culture, but I think as well the examination of the political unrest and how it hasn't changed when we get to something like Amores Perros. Like I was thinking about Roma a little bit, which will obviously pop up on the show as the best international feature winner. So
I mean, I think in those like
trying to knock out the microphone there. Sorry, guys.
In this Roma
headphone users RIP.
It's a Mama and Roma. This I think like heavily Mexico. Is
the character, right? It feels like a very alive city. You're in a live country. Sorry, you're in Mexico. Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's a lot of foreign language films that we've watched so far on the podcast that you could relocate to a different country, and I'm not sure how much of an impact it would have on the story.
Totally.
Whereas this and Itumama, I think, they have to be set in Mexico because, as you said, it's a character in and of itself. In the same way that a lot of films set in New York City.
Yes.
And Los Angeles. Yes. The setting is so much a part of the story.
I'm just a New York gal. Sort of, I was like, that makes sense. Show me the Empire State Building again.
In terms of films that I find it similar to, City of God is a great call.
I love that,
In terms of like the story and that sort of gritty crime underworld, young people trying to find their way out of poverty. And I think in terms of the interconnecting stories, we talked about Pulp Fiction. And I think Sin City as well is another good example.
I think that's a good example.
For trying to think of, stuff that people might have seen. But there's not too many. Like I'm looking at the Wikipedia article for hyperlink cinema, as they call it.
Point out an elephant in the room one, but Crash. Which kind of is Amores Perros done, dare I say, worse?
I mean,
it is a
arguably the worst Best Picture winner of all time, or at least the 21st century.
It's very much the white guilt Oscar award, isn't it?
But it's a great comparison.
It is a great comparison.
If you watch Crash and went, wow, I'd like to watch this if it was better. Watch Amores Perros.
is for you. Is absolutely for you. I guess as well, looking at now Alejandro Iñárritu's career. And so where it went from there, his next film was a English speaking language film. It was I guess for lack of a better word, Hollywood-ish production with 21 Grams.
Starring Sean Penn.
Sean Penn, Naomi Watts. So he had a great cast. But he's been very good at diversifying his career and doing, Oscar-winning films like The Revenant, like Birdman, but also then coming back and he did Bardo recently, which is another film, a Mexican film. So compared to the films, and it's so funny because when we were talking about this the other night, I was like, oh shit, I think I've seen less of his filmography than I thought, because I can only compare this to Birdman and The Revenant.
Oh wow!
Which is kind of crazy. I was like, it's a massive hole in my my cinematic experience, I guess. So, having potentially seen a few more of his films, how does this compare to Alejandro Iñárritu's work, both English and non-English speaking?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said just earlier that I actually watched his films in order as they came out.
Right. I think it's worth saying with that as well that 21 Grams and Babel are very much the interconnected strange story.
The trilogy of death is what they call it.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Okay. That's fucking cool.
Yeah.
I was like, damn.
you got 2 more films to see.
I know. I really want to get my death on today.
Yeah, and as you say, structurally they're kind of similar.
Yeah, hyperlink cinema, as we now know. Yeah.
So those 3 films for sure are in this realm.
Yeah, okay.
And then he even said that he just became a little bit done with trying to work 3 stories into.
So then he made Birdman.
Yeah. Well, he made Beautiful.
He did make Beautiful first.
With Javier Bardem.
Which I haven't seen. So.
Which is just about, it's one story, one guy.
Okay, so he went
Pretty
literally from
straightforward.
one to the other.
Yeah.
He's like, rather than 6 different people, let's go
that's
with
right.
one
Let's
guy.
make it a bit simpler.
I mean, Birdman was my introduction to Iñárritu,
Yeah, it
along
was
with
mine
probably
as
a
well.
lot of other people.
Yeah.
And I love that film. I know that
I love that film.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people are a bit, on it. And like as a best picture winner, people are like, oh, did it really deserve to win? But I think it's fantastic. I think the way that it plays with the form, it's hilarious. Like Ed Norton in that film is fantastic.
Oh, he's so good at that movie.
Michael Keaton should have won an Oscar. It's a phenomenal film. And I really enjoyed The Revenant as well. And I think that's a great example as well of not interconnecting stories, but these stories that span these sort of great distances, both physically and sort of thematically and emotionally as well.
I think this film as well, comparatively, and I think he does it really well. It highlights his ability as a technical director. Birdman is filmed to look like it is one complete shot, but they obviously did really long takes of that as well. The big thing with The Revenant is that it pretty much used all natural lighting. They tried to not use any artificial lighting in that film, and this sort of very gritty, natural feel to it as well. And I think something like Amores Perros, it highlights his ability to capture location as character, like we were saying. New York is a big part of Birdman, and I think it's the Midwest in The Revenant. I think it's some part of
America,
Red Dead Redemption America. So
you're fighting bears in the snow.
But his ability to capture those sorts of things on film, and then sort of as he got more experience as a filmmaker, try these insane technical things. I think him as a visual director is quite exciting, and it does to me start with this film.
Yeah, and probably on that as well, I actually didn't realize who the cinematographer was.
Yes,
for this.
Who is it?
What's his name?
Rodrigo Prieto.
So he.
Wait till you hear this fucking
Let me
filmography.
just list some film. I actually couldn't believe this. Like, he's worked with Iñárritu a lot.
Yeah.
But he's also he did Brokeback Mountain.
Right.
He did Argo.
Yep.
He then started working with Scorsese. He did
Marty.
Wolf of Wall Street, The Irishman. He's just done Killers of the Flower Moon. And he did a little film this year called Barbie.
For those who are listening,
your face going just every movie you're like,
how have I never heard of this guy?
Yeah.
And so it's just Mexican
Amores
Roger
Perros.
Deakins.
You're right.
You're
right.
Yeah, that's astonishing,
isn't it? Yeah,
and I'm not
incredible.
surprised because it is a great looking
great
film,
looking.
even though
It
it's
does look
very sort of gritty and rough. It's hard to do that properly.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very
Yeah,
easy
yeah,
to
yeah.
make a gritty looking film and it looks like shit.
Yes.
It's hard to make a gritty looking film look good. I think City of God is another great example of that.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I think as a debut feature, it's really impressive. Like, I've been watching a lot of debut features recently, and you look at someone who's gone on to do like amazing things like a Villeneuve or a Nolan. Following is okay. It's not a great film.
Then you get Memento.
Yep.
Which he could kind of call his first movie if you wanted to, yeah.
And then you look at Villeneuve, and I mean, I think his first 2 films are pretty terrible. And then he goes on to do Polytechnic, which is pretty good. And then Incendies, which is kind of his breakout film, is his 4th movie.
Yeah.
So to do this as a debut film, that's really impressive because to tackle a 2.5 hour interconnecting stories as you said, it's almost like he went, if I'm only going to make one film, I'm gonna make a film.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Totally.
make a goddamn movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any standout performances as we begin to slowly wrap up?
I feel like I know Josh's.
I think we might agree.
Gael became and still is one of my favorite actors.
Yeah,
But
totally.
at this time when I was watching this Itu Mama Tambien, I started watching all his films. So for me,
Which there wouldn't have been a lot to choose from being his first film.
And
Like,
this
shit,
is his for this to be a first feature film for
Yeah.
him. He's impressive
great.
in
He's
this.
He is so enigmatic and electric on screen. Like you cannot look away from him
No.
whatever he's doing.
No.
And but even like, the scene where he's just lying on the bed, flicking the lamp on and off, having to listen to his brother and the woman he loves have sex in the next room.
Yeah.
He just has this disdain on his face of being like, I fucking hate this. And then all of a sudden he's like, also, I'm making $20,000 or pesos a dogfight. He has this range in this film, which is fantastic. And then obviously later events in the film where we see him pop up in the other stories and sort of the range he gets to play with there.
Yeah.
Incredible. He's my standout too, for sure.
But I mean, I also love, sorry, I don't actually know his name, but the guy who plays El Chivo.
Emilio Echevarria.
Yeah. I think all the way through it, even when he's not talking, his on-screen presence is
Totally.
it's
Agreed.
pretty foreboding and
Very much so. Yeah.
Does a lot with his face as well.
Yeah.
Like we talk about that with actors a lot, and people who probably don't watch performances as closely as we do will be like, what do you mean they do stuff with it? They all do stuff with their face.
Yeah.
But there are certain
there's
actors who
certain,
use their facial expressions and their facial features to convey so much more emotion than others, so you can get a lot out of them without them saying anything.
Yeah.
I think Gael does that.
Yeah.
And I think Emilio, who plays El Chivo, does that as well. Like,
And he's hidden behind a big beard for the majority of
he's
the
homeless,
film.
right?
Yeah.
So
homeless
it's a
look.
lot of eyes and
yeah. So I think, they're the real standouts. But Gael Garcia Bernal as Octavio, I was so invested in him. I was really rooting for him. I wanted him to succeed in his sort of this fantasy almost of running away, to like a small town and opening a shop with Susanna and
that's
then,
right,
having this little life together.
Yeah.
And like I said, even though he's not a perfect character, I was really hoping that he would succeed, and I was so emotionally invested in him.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mark of a good performance and a well-written character, that they can not be perfect and you're still emotionally invested in their success.
Totally.
I think Ramiro, who is Octavio's brother, played by Marco Perez,
really
Yep.
good.
he's a real piece of shit.
Yeah.
But he does it really well.
Just means he's a great actor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you do
You really hate him.
Like, I think one of the other antagonists of the film, which is Jarocho, which is the guy who sort of is, the big dog in the dog fighting ring.
Yeah.
He sort of feels like a bit of a almost cartoonish villain.
Yes.
Yeah, although, and I only saw it this morning, some little behind the scenes of before he started filming, he went and filmed some real dog fights.
Wow.
And he went and visited them, and they still go on today. It said on this thing.
Yeah.
Crazy, hey?
But there's one sort of video of this guy who's obviously running them, and he looks exactly like that bloke.
Like the bleached hair and like the earring
and
and
he's just kind
Shirt
of
off all the time,
Yeah.
sort of shit. Yeah.
like a real character.
Yeah.
It's crazy,
Yeah,
hey?
yeah,
But again, he's probably that sort of guy who's like living in his own movie. You know what I mean? Like,
you're
that's
right.
probably the
Big main
really-
character
really-
energy, as the kids say.
100%.
But yeah, I think there's some good villains in this film, and I think it's hard to play that well.
Yeah.
So props to Marco Perez
Absolutely.
if you're
Tiny
listening to the
little bit
show.
of trivia as well.
Yes.
Where Gael's just about to get on that bus.
Yes.
The bus driver is his dad.
Gael's dad.
Yeah.
Hey, that's
cute.
The family.
Yeah,
That's
I
like
nice.
that.
That's nice. That's
You're always
fun.
coming through with the trivia, which I love.
saw that and I was like,
Josh
that's
is
cool.
good. Josh is
That's
on
cool.
it. I love it.
Random bit of connection as well. The Emilio Echevarria, who plays El Chivo, is in Itu Mama Tambien.
He is. Oh,
As who?
I've been trying to work it out because I've just been sitting here reading the Wikipedia article as we're recording. And I can't work it out who he
Miguel.
is. Yeah.
It's a good excuse to go back and watch It's a Mama Tambien again.
Yeah. But El Chivo is in Itu Mama Tambien. The only thing I can think is that is he like the president that
Is he at
visits
that
the
wedding? I was about
the
to say.
wedding?
Oh, he might be, yeah.
Because when they're at the wedding, they get like the Mexican president to come.
That's right,
Yes.
yeah.
I'm wondering if that's maybe him.
Potentially.
I don't think he's a big character, but I was just looking at his filmography and I saw Itzumama Tambien in there. So, yeah.
There we go.
Oh.
Connections. Keeping it in the family again.
Obviously, Gael is the obvious one, but...
Yes, right, but there we go.
Yeah.
Emilio coming through.
Hyperlink cinema, baby.
Well, that's bringing us towards the end of Amores Perros. Josh, do you have a little elevator pitch for the audience?
Have you done one of these yet?
Yeah. Did
you have to do one? No, I think we introduced
No, I
it
did have to
after
do one,
we
but I
did
didn't
for
do
you.
it wasn't very good.
I hope you practiced.
That's all right. Neither am mine.
On Nick's last one, it was like the world's longest elevator. So
That's
you,
right.
sure.
I'll give it-
Yeah,
I'll give it
that was
the 60
seconds.
Okay. Yeah. Well, first of all, you need to be able to watch some dogs fight. Because
I'm getting out on that floor.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's right. Because if you can't, probably leave this alone.
Yeah.
But it happens. It's obviously happening over there. He's shed some light on that. So, if you like City of God, as we've said, the structure of Pulp Fiction, again, to see someone, a good director's first film.
Yeah.
It's frenetic. It's
Yeah. It's chaotic.
It's dynamic. It's like dirty, harsh. You really feel like you've kind of been to a part of Mexico City. It's a good little trip over to Mexico for a haunting and,
not
an exhausting experience.
And that's why we love it.
One last thing that I did want to touch on is, I don't know if you guys got this sense as well, but it does almost feel like overarchingly it is a crime drama film.
Yep.
But I feel like each section is its own sort of genre in a way.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the first story is very much like a City of God style crime drama.
Thriller, yep.
I think the second story feels a bit more like a romantic drama. Like there is obviously an element of romance and sort of like this, awful thing that happens to them in the drama that follows. And then the third story, I got kind of Western vibes to it almost.
Okay, yeah. I can see that.
Old man with a gun and a dog.
Yeah.
Like trying to go on
Roam
this
in the streets.
this journey of redemption.
Journey,
Especially with sort of
the final shot.
I mean, it's not much of a spoiler. The final shot, we see him walking off into the sunset with the dog.
Yeah.
And that I was like, oh man, I feel like I've just watched
That
a
also
Western.
that he's renamed, like sort of claimed it as his own dog.
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Well, that's it. He's sort of reinvented himself, reinvented the dog, and he's going on this new journey. Which I think is just gave me a bit sort of Western vibes. So I think it's really interesting that you can have like all these different genres and subgenres within the one film, and without it feeling sort of tonally inconsistent.
Yeah.
So again, props
call.
off to our friend Alejandro,
There we go.
regular listener of the show.
Shout out. Thanks for listening.
That joke's never going to get old. I'm going to keep using that every episode.
Well, that was Amores Perros from Mexico. Thank you all for watching.
Hang on, stars.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, star rating.
What do you,
what
what do you guys? What do you want me to go first?
You go first.
Josh.
Well, it's interesting. Just when I went on my IMDb, I'd rated it way back.
While
and I
ago,
rated it 9 out of 10.
So 4.5.
4.5. And I'll stick with that.
Stick with 4.5?
The middle one just drops it down for me, obviously, like we spoke about. Probably going to drop it down a bit more for you guys. But this was in my early foreign film watching.
Yeah. Very formative. Sort of.
Yeah. And I love this movie.
Well, it would have been things like this, Itumama, City of God, Delicatessen, that probably
is.
would have really kickstarted your appreciation and love of
cinema.
foreign movies.
Yeah, for sure.
Movies. Yeah. Kieran.
Throwing me under the bus.
Yeah, a little bit. I just want to see what you do first.
Chivalry is dead, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, you say it in 3.
I'm gonna go 4.
Okay.
I think it could have been higher, as we sort of joked about, but on a serious note, if not for the middle story, I really zoned out in there. And the third story did bring me back, but I just couldn't get involved in that middle story. And I think it's because I was so invested in that first story. I would have watched 2.5 hours of just Octavio and Susanna's story, because I think there is a 2.5 hour film there, and I would have loved it. That's a 9 out of 10 film right there. But for me, it's probably somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4, but closer to a 4, I think. So I'm going 4 out of 5.
Well, we're going descending order with the rating system today, and I've gone 3.5 on this first watch because I did struggle with the structure of the story, and like I said, El Chivo's story, while I still think it had redeemable qualities, did have to do a lot of work to get me back in after Valeria and Daniel's story.
Richie!
And
Little
Richie.
Richie's the real MVP.
Little Richie. But I think honestly the first story is up my alley, and that to me is a 5-star movie, and I think it just lost a little bit of its momentum for me. And all my ratings also sort of contain a bit of the entertainment value in it as well. I think it definitely lost 0.5 star for that for me. After the talk today, like many of our episodes, it's definitely one I think I could revisit, and it probably could go up similar to Kieran's in between a 3.5 and a 4 for me. But I'm going to stick with the 3.5 for now. But I do see that coming up on a rewatch.
And just to clarify, I think we would all recommend this film.
God, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So long as Josh said, you can handle the animal cruelty, the not real, obviously, animal cruelty. We'd all recommend it.
Yep.
Our ratings are all complete bullshit and mean nothing.
Yep. That's it.
Anyone who tells you otherwise is full of it. Ratings are meaningless. I think it boils down to, would you recommend this movie or not?
Yeah.
And I think for
Absolutely.
all of us,
Yeah,
it's a yes.
Yeah.
Favorite scenes just to close out.
Oh, yeah.
Starting with you, since you went, you threw us under the bus.
Mr. fucking 3.5 over here. I don't want to spoil it, but I love the intensity of the final dogfight and where it all leads to. And I think that is a perfect culmination of where Octavio's story has taken him to that point, and it's quite a shocking result, I would say. But I think similar to the opening car chase scene, I think Iñárritu's ability to be frantic and chaotic and energetic, but also he almost captures most of that in one shot too. That was my favorite scene.
I think there's a difference between something being captured in one shot and feeling like one shot.
Totally.
So even if there was cuts in there, they're done so well that it just feels
It doesn't lose its momentum at all. That scene.
the pacing is up the whole time. So I agree, that's a great scene. Josh?
I think the opening scene for me. I know we spoke about how strong this film
so
starts off, but it's as soon as that black screen goes away, you are in it.
Yeah.
And it is chaos. I just love that feeling.
Yeah, and you're in it up to your neck. Like
Yeah,
you
you are.
meet these characters
It's
at
that
the worst
uncut
possible
gems
time.
kind of
It's
tense
super
feel. You're
uncut
like,
gems.
shit's going bad here.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think for me, just to pick something a little bit different,
Richie.
Richie.
When they find
When they
Richie,
find Richie. Thank fuck.
she's not going to
That's when I
say.
turned off the movie. I was like, it can't get any better than this. We found Richie, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
We got him.
To give a bit of context, El Chivo is hired by a man to kill his business partner.
Yes.
El Chivo captures the man,
Yeah, and then
brings him back to his hideout, but then he also captures the guy that hired him originally.
So
and he
good.
basically locks them in a room together and goes, he hired you to kill him.
Yeah.
Here's a gun, sort it out between yourselves, and
throws
walks
it in the
off.
middle.
And I just love that.
Yeah, it's great.
That's
That is good,
There's like this sort of surreal comedy to it that he's just going,
Yes.
I am so done with
Yeah.
people shit.
yes, totally. Yeah,
You want to kill him, he wants to kill you, just figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I really love that scene. And I think it's almost like this cathartic letting go for him. He's like, I'm so done with this life. This is not me anymore.
Yeah.
People disgust me. I'm just going to go and hang out with my dog forever.
forever. Yeah,
Yeah. So I love
it's
that
not a
scene.
bad life to live.
God, he looks different without a beard.
Oh, when he has his
It looks
glow
like a
up.
completely different actor.
I thought, I'm like, have they someone different?
Well, he's gone from like this sort of like real rough resistance fiery looking dude.
Stereotypical homeless guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
And then looks like somebody's, banker uncle.
Yeah.
It's a good comparison, actually. Yeah. Well, that is finally Amores Perros. Before we plug all of our things and thanking you for watching us, Kieran, you've been building this up outside of the show
I've been excited for this.
for a little while now, and you were teasing us at our 7 screen. You were like, "You
always
guys are
like
gonna
to
be-"
tease you boys.
We were like, "Hey, we like to be teased." So why don't you finish us off finally and tell us what we are going to be covering on the next episode of That One Inch Barrier?
your well-earned happy ending. So we've been doing a lot of long films lately. So I'm going short.
Thank God.
Going short.
Well, that's good after your last
Last
was
one.
Legan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've gone from 4 hours to I think about 100 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, we can deal with that.
We are recording this on the 22nd of October to give away some secrets. It's the spooky season. Halloween's coming up.
Ooh.
So I'm going horror.
Whoa,
Yeah.
okay.
Which I don't, for people who follow me on my accounts, I'm not a big horror fan. So
I
for me,
am, so I'm excited. Yeah.
so for me to recommend a horror, it's a big deal.
I'm so
Yeah.
excited about a foreign horror. So
I have an idea.
We're going to Spain,
I think I know what this is.
and we're covering a 2007 film called Wreck.
called.
Wreck. R-E-C.
REC.
Oh yes, I know.
Fucking.
Which is a
Banger
found
movie.
footage horror
Yes,
film.
Yes.
It got remade in America as Quarantine,
Quarantine.
Yeah.
which is a much worse version. But this is one of my favorite horror films. It's one of the first foreign language films I watched. So I'm really, really excited. And I feel like, like I said, it's Halloween's coming up. Let's do some horror. Let's do something short and sharp.
Hell yeah. Oh, I'm
That's-
excited. The happiest of endings. Whew.
I'm not sure if I've seen it.
Oh, that's good because I wasn't sure whether you guys would have seen it. So it's nice that you've not.
I can't remember.
You've not watched it.
We'll talk about it more on the episode, but I'll also point out Rec 2 is actually a fucking great sequel.
Oh, really?
Spanish as well?
Spanish as well.
Yeah.
Because there's four
literally-
of them.
Oh wow.
3 and 4, no.
Yeah.
Number 2 picks up exactly where Rec finishes. And it's like a SWAT team coming in now because this is like we'll talk about it next episode. I'm very excited. So that'll be on the next episode.
Table's just lifted up
Yeah,
slightly.
just a little bit. Yeah, sorry if you can't see me on camera. But thank you all for watching. If you're watching on YouTube or listening, if you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Amazon Podcasts, we appreciate all your support. Consider subscribing, liking, following, downloading episodes. It all helps us out. You can find all of our social links at our Letterboxd accounts in the links below. You'll see all the shit I've been watching for, and you'll be like, wow, and he does this podcast and watches that. But you'll find some more.
Why are his favorite movies all 4 Fast and Furious films?
And the same one. I just put the same one 4 times.
Tokyo Drift 4 times.
It's a good one. But thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode of That 1 Inch Barrier.
Bye, Richie.